On the news that USAID has been funding gain-of-function research around the COVID pandemic, it begs the question, has that happened with bird flu? Is that why we are being warned about it? A recent article in the academic press has doctors wondering why the new bird flu strain is so mild, as if they kind of want a different outcome. Well, Dr. James Thorpe has joined us from the Wellness Company. He has an upcoming book coming out called Sacrifice: How the Deadliest Vaccine in History Targeted the Most Vulnerable. And he warned about the implications of the COVID pandemic loud and wide, and was widely censored and ignored. So thank you for joining me to talk about where we are now, Dr. Thorpe.
Thank you so much for having me on, Natalie.
So it seems that the drumbeat is getting louder and louder regarding the bird flu. So the first question then, in light of what we went through for COVID, does this seem a repeatable pattern? Why are doctors asking, this is kind of mild, wasn't supposed to be like that? Hasn't that, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's really deja vu all over again, isn't it? And we know now that this gain of function was perpetrated in the COVID-19 vaccine, clearly, and it was supported by the United States government through Wuhan Institute of Virology. The same thing has been going on, Natalie, for decades and decades with many potential pathogens. With regard to H5N1, the avian flu, we know, we can prove that this had gain of function performed on it, actually through the USDA Poultry Center, Research Center in Athens, Georgia. This is where the gain of function research took place.
Isn't that where the victim who died recently was, in fact, in Georgia? I didn't realize that there was that correlation. Doctors have said, well, we better brace for this because bird flu has we hear various numbers between 30 and 50% fatality rate. But in the United States, it's been very mild. And so the one person who did die of this had comorbidities. And so doctors are saying, it's kind of mutated. It's milder than we thought. And so is there a possibility that, of course, there was gain of function and they accidentally made it less dangerous?
Well, I'm not sure if that individual was in Georgia or Louisiana. I think the individual was from Louisiana, and this was
you're right.
An individual that was elderly and multiple other illnesses and protracted hospitalization. So yes, you're right. There's about 70 cases in the United States of America. The vast majority are mild. And I think that this is largely overblown by the stakeholders that have a tremendous amount to gain. The vaccine manufacturers and also the government. And also remember, there's private funders too, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Right. And so we see Bill Gates being reframed as this person who has benevolent intentions towards vaccine and is, I'm going to use the word, weaseling his way into the Trump administration. At the same time, we see the Trump administration placing pauses on new research and deciding that these organizations that has funded these research are being either revoked or they're atrophied. And so is it something that the Trump administration could pull back and stop, or do you think it's just too big of a beast and it's a whack-a-mole game?
I'm optimistic. If Bobby gets confirmed, I'm optimistic that this so-called dual purpose gain of function research will be completely shut down. And you know what that is, but for your audience, dual purpose is the thought where it's gain of function research, but it's okay because we're going to create a pathogen and then we'll create a antidote or a vaccine for it. This is very dangerous, and this needs to stop immediately.
Right. It's very similar to the weapons labs that we have in Ukraine. And we're like, well, we're just reverse engineering them. We're not putting them together. We're unputting them together to learn something. I mean, who buys this? And so can you remind us that we have curatives now for bird flu the same way we did for the COVID pandemic? And what is it we can know now that in the future we may not be able to know if the same censorship government has its way?
Well, yes, there are curatives, and I think we need to be aware of it, and they're very simple. Let us not forget that just 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, it was Dr. Peter Hotez who told us there were going to be multiple pandemics breaking out the day after Trump was inaugurated, right? So, but for this, I would not be scared, just be prepared. We at the Wellness Company have been talking about this sham for over a year. And I think that most of our audience is prepared. Nobody's afraid of it. We have this immune spray, immune mist, and these iodinated gargles, nasal mists, throat sprays. These are very, very effective early on. And also with our contagion kit, we have several potential remedies, including for example, hydroxychloroquine, which has shown efficacy. We also have Tamiflu, which had shown efficacy. Also, I want to remind all of our viewers that I recommend personally that you check your own blood vitamin D level, and a lower normal level is not adequate. I would like you to get it up to the 90 range, the upper limit of normal range. And this is the most effective preventative and will reduce if you do have a large contagion. This will really remedy and decrease your vulnerability.
So we saw Gavin Newsom declare a state of emergency in December over bird flu. What is the emergency, and what could a government possibly be up to in doing something like this? And of course, it's rich now that a few weeks later, his entire state burned and he's looking at bird flu, probably one of the many reasons he's facing yet another recall vote. What are politicians like Gavin Newsom doing?
Instilling fear in the population, because if they instill fear in the population, we can control them. And they want to market this. Remember what they've said in the past. Don't let any disaster, go to a bad use. It's an opportunity to control the people more. And there are the proponents and the stakeholders that are pushing for a vaccine. There's already a human vaccine, Sequarius, and that was released in Northern Europe. And in fact, there were 4 times the number of deaths, if you can believe this, Natali, in the treatment group than the placebo group. And now Moderna has a contract. And again, this is a massive moneymaker for the corporate kleptocratic government pharmaceutical medical complex.
Now, you are practicing OBGYN. One of the main tenets of your book is that the COVID-19 vaccine was given to populations that did not need it and resulted in harm. And I'm going to say this carefully because we are still under the guidelines on certain platforms we stream on to defer to the World Health Organization, which has continued to say that the COVID-19 vaccine was amazing and saved lives across the board. My facial expression will tell you how I feel about that. But something that was prominent in the RFK confirmation hearings was that individual metabolic health makes a difference, and there is no one-size-fits-all treatment across the board. So can you tell us a little bit about how you make that point in your book, again, within the confines of the censorship regime we still broadcast under?
Yes, and I'm not exactly sure the details of your constraints, but let me just say clearly.
Well, what YouTube says is that we must defer to what local authorities and the World Health Organization says. And so we know the World Health Organization promotes the COVID vaccine. And in fact, just months ago, they said, continue to get your boosters. We know that the United States has withdrawn from the World Health Organization. So what we cannot say is specifically things against the COVID-19 vaccine, but we can sort of imply things. And I apologize to my viewers for saying that those are, it's not my, I would say things much differently if I could.
Yes, well, I would just point the readers and the audience to the actual Pfizer data themselves, the initial 5.3.6 post-market survey. And is it appropriate for me to review that to your audience?
You can. I will point out that we got a 2-week suspension in 2021 for reading that very marketing data. We can, in fact, say what it says now. And I think what I'm asking you is about these various targeted population as an OBGYN. I think what you're referring to is pregnant women and small children, right?
Right. My population, I've been in practice for almost 46 years now, Natali. I'm still practicing actively. And there's always been a golden rule of pregnancy. You never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, implement a novel substance in pregnancy. And I think you know that, and most of the world knows that. That's been a 6 millennia golden rule. So we, especially in the last 100 years, we've learned our lesson with the horrible disasters of thalidomide and diethylstilbestrol, DES. And listen, the current vaccine makes DES and thalidomide look like prenatal vitamins.
Okay, what do you mean by that? Because they're promoting it so much.
Well, what I'm saying is they're so much more lethal and deadly. The current preventative measure, if you will, by far and away, this is a million times greater than the disasters of diethylstilbestrol and thalidomide.
Okay.
The inoculation.
And so then, and yet, on the heels of the COVID vaccine, we get a RSV vaccine for pregnant women, which again comes in under the auspices of fast track authorization from the FDA. So is this just something that we're going to have under unless the Trump administration and RFK Jr. stops it, is fast tracking vaccines and no more questioning prenatal care?
Well, I'm in active practice. I can tell you where I'm practicing right now. No pregnant women are taking any vaccines. And there's not any vaccines in pregnancy that should be taken. None of them. They've never been proven to be safe or effective in a randomized double-blinded trial and never had long-term follow-up in the children.
Yeah.
And I will also say that, even recent studies have demonstrated that sudden infant death syndrome, 78% of those cases occur within a week of vaccination of infants, Natali, and 58% occur within 48 hours.
Wow. That's an amazing correlation. Yes, that needs to be studied, honestly. So that's another thing we can ask under the RFK Jr. Health and Human Services Administration. So the book, again, is coming out in February 18th. It's called Sacrifice: How the Deadliest Vaccine in History Targeted the Most Vulnerable. I remind you that Dr. Thorpe is with the Wellness Company, which is a sponsor of Redacted. They offer a contagion kit where you can collect some of these curatives in your home in case we are not allowed. We've told you about that before. It's twc.health/redacted. So Dr. Thorpe, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And I hope you'll come back once the book is released and we can talk more about that.
Thanks for having me on, Natali.